This is Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. We enthuse, we energize, we inspire, and we empower intrapreneurs and entrepreneurs of all stripes in BW and beyond. Hello, Dumelang. Welcome to another episode of Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. Mompoloki Lerumo Mogobe here, your host. As we get into year number 5 with this podcast, I'm very, very excited to have you as a part of the audience, and please keep supporting us. And the easiest way for you to support us, if you haven't done so already, is to strike that notification bell as well as the subscribe button. We really need your support to keep us on air and to keep us being able to give dynamic, life-changing, empowering business information twice a week, as we've been doing for the last 4+ years. Let me welcome my guest, and I'll give her an opportunity to introduce herself. And my guest is
Katlego Tebogo Kabotho.
Okay.
Good afternoon. My name, as I've already mentioned, is Katlego Kabotho from Maranyane Medical Laboratory. I am the founder and director of Maranyane Medical Lab based in Jani.
What academically have you done to get where you are?
So I studied Bachelor of Biomedical Science, BSc in Biomedical Science from the year 2009 to 2012 in Namibia, sponsored by the government of the day. I came back in 2013, worked for one of the biggest private labs in Botswana for a year. And then I...
Sounds like Diagnopharm.
Yes, it is. I was there for a year, and then I joined the public sector. I was based in Scottish Livingston Hospital, where I worked for 6 years.
Okay.
Yes. But in the 6 years that I was in Scottish Livingston Hospital, I knew when I got there that I had a plan. I wanted to stay there for at least about 3 years. But I stayed for 6, like I said. But in those 6 years, midway, I then started with my MSc in clinical epidemiology. So I was a full-time student and I was a full-time employee. This is in Stellenbosch University in Cape Town. So what I did was I would go back and forth for school as well as work. I'd take a block release, maybe a week or 2 off at school, and then I'd come back, work just like everybody else, night shifts and all the other shifts, because it's a hospital laboratory, so it operates full time. And then from there, I joined the corporate for 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, let me unpack that a little bit. What on earth is clinical epidemiology?
So what epidemiologists do, a lot of people resonate with what just happened in the past couple of years with COVID. So what epidemiologists do, they look at epidemics in general, or disease patterns. They study disease patterns in populations, and then they look at the etiology, what causes the disease, how can the disease be treated.
Etiology is what causes the disease.
Yes, etiology is that's the definition, and how it's passed on from person to person. There's vaccine issues as well, as we did. So COVID was a key or a very good example of what epidemiologists do in general, and see how the spread can be dealt with, so that not a lot of people die from whatever it is. So that's basically what it is. But we bring it clinically because we know that with epidemiology, we deal with evidence-based healthcare. So everything that we do from an epidemiological perspective has to be evidence-based. So we look at studies, we dissect studies. We were taught skills of how to appraise certain journal articles, scientific journal articles, how to speak to the literature and make it very digestible. So that is what we do in general, or in a nutshell.
Your company is called Maranyane Medical Lab, or Laboratory. Tell us the genesis of the name and the lab itself.
Yes, so a lot of the medical laboratories around, their names are very English. So I'm a Motswana young girl from Dikgawana. Well, I don't know if I'm that young anymore, but I'm still.
I suggest that you still are.
Yes. And I wanted a name that Botswana would resonate with. So it's a lab by a Motswana for Botswana. And I just wanted us to be able to relate with the name. And of course, in the laboratory, we use very high-tech instruments. So we use Maranyane basically to give people the services that we do. Yes.
And what sort of Maranyane exactly do you use?
We use different kinds of equipment in the lab. For instance, I'll go back to COVID because that's what a lot of people, can resonate with. We use machines that can do nucleic acid amplifications like your PCR. You had to have a negative PCR for you to cross the border or do anything. So we used really sophisticated equipment that can be able to help us in the diagnosis and treatment of patients, because that's where the lab comes in as a whole.
Let me take you back a little bit in terms of what caused you to jump in terms of going into your own business, or were you pushed? Tell us about that.
Right. So like I said earlier, when I was in Scottish Livingston Hospital and I was pursuing my MSc, I then got an opportunity just before graduation to join the corporate world. I worked for a medical supplies company, and that is where I got exposed to the corporate world and the dynamics of it. So I was purely technical for about 7 or so years, and when I was introduced to the corporate world, my mind just went berserk. And because I like challenges, I like growing in that regard, I saw
Why
an
do you mean
opportunity.
it went berserk? What does that mean?
It went berserk because I got exposed to a lot of things that I was naive to. Naive in the sense that I was purely technical, right? So I was just a science girl who was running patient samples. Now I was a sales and marketing manager. I had to sell medical equipment to people. So I had to learn the language. I had to go deeper into how to deal with people from a relationship perspective. So I learned a lot of things, and just, being scientists, we don't deal with money a lot. So when you go into the corporate space and you become exposed to talking to people about money, and these equipments don't come cheap, and you're like, okay, so there could be opportunities here. So 3 years later, I resigned and I was heading Maranyane Medical Lab. But prior to that...
What year was that?
It was this year. So Maranyane Medical Lab is 6 months old.
Oh, okay.
We just turned 6 months a few days ago. Yes.
That's very, very interesting.
Yeah.
What would you say are the key functions and competencies of Maranyane?
Maranyane Medical Lab provides medical laboratory services to both public and private clients. So what I mean by that is, for instance, a patient would go to the doctor, and the doctor would need to do a couple of investigations, and the general public knew at some point that either the doctor does the tests or that. But what happens is, because we are always in the background, the samples will be sent to the medical laboratory. So we do all those investigations depending on what the doctor wants to investigate. But not only that, we also advise to say, okay, so this is what we found out, but with the picture of what we see, perhaps we can go further and do ABC. So not only are we there to provide a diagnostic, service, but we also help as to serve as advisories to the medical doctors.
How difficult is it, otherwise, is it to register and to comply with the regulations, the regulatory requirements to set up?
Yes, so that will take me to a year prior to Maranyane was open for business. We have to comply with regulations. So being a private medical laboratory, the Ministry of Health is the overseeing body. So first of all, in 2020, I put in an application. This was when I was fresh at that company that I spoke of, right? And I sent in an application to the Ministry of Health to say I want to pursue this in Jwaneng. I was very specific because I'd seen an opportunity there. It took a bit of time to get a response, but I did get a response saying, go ahead, but you need to comply with 1, 2, 3. So this was 2020, and then 2021 was more of me now setting up, especially from a financial perspective, buying this and that. And I was saving from my pocket, so that's why it took a bit of time. And then 2022 was now when I was doing more of the compliance and licensing.
Yeah, you said 1, 2, 3. What is that 1, 2, 3?
Yes, that's what I'm getting to. So because the medical space is very strict from a regulations perspective, there's certain guidelines we need to abide by with the regulator, which is the Ministry of Health. So once you get that letter and then you set up the medical laboratory, you have your equipment, you have all the SOPs and everything that you need to run the lab, the health inspectorate now comes in to assess whether you comply with the rules and regulations, and then they can say, okay, you comply, or there's a bit of non-conformances that you need to deal with before we license you. So that's exactly what happened to me. There were a bit of gaps that I had to go back and go fix, and then call them back to say, okay, so I've done 1, 2, 3 corrective action and all of that, and then they came back, reassessed, and then that's when they gave me a go ahead to say, okay, now we've licensed you to go see patients, to go and service the community of Jwaneng and beyond.
Yeah.
Yes.
Corona. It turned everything upside down.
It did.
How did it affect you yourself?
So COVID was a huge learning curve for most of us. And fortunately, I was a bit cushioned because I was still an employee at the time. But needless to say, I was in the mix of it because we were providing medical laboratory equipment to both the private and public sector. So even when people were on lockdowns, we were full force. We were part of, the frontliners because we were equipping and training them in order for us to be able to train and all of that. So it also stretched our minds. It stretched us physically, but we also saw opportunities in that, and we became a bit more resilient.
You guys charged $800 to go to South Africa. We're not very happy about that.
Yes, so like I said, we use very sophisticated equipment to produce these results, and a lot of the equipment was purchased from either the US, China, Germany. So we had to purchase the equipment in order to sell it to the end users. At the time, I was a supplier. I wasn't the end user or in the medical laboratory space at the time. So even the reagents that we were using were expensive because demand was very, very high and supply was low. That's why there were times when we couldn't locally do these tests because there was simply no reagents. The big guys were hoarding everything to themselves. So yeah,
it's terrible.
It was a pack of gloves at the time could cost like 500 pula, which normally it costs like 67 pula. So you can just tell that it was pretty rough.
Speaking of corona, you go into the internet, you get all kinds of theories. Some of them labeled conspiracy theories, that it started in the Wuhan lab, it was man-made, it was just hugely exaggerated, that masks are not as good as they're cracked up to be. So many things to say there, but what is your take on the whole thing?
My take on the whole thing is that just like the Spanish flu that massacred a lot of people years ago, we do have, especially diseases that cross from, or bugs that cross from animals to people, which are called zoonotic infections. We do have those, and we've had quite a couple emanating from China. So as an epidemiologist and just a scientist in general, I sort of stuck to the facts, and that's sort of what we went with. And then when the sequencing of
what are the facts? That's always been the challenge.
Yeah, the facts were, or what we were told was that this was a zoonotic infection. It crossed
zoonotic.
Zoonotic, yeah. It crossed from an animal to a human being, and then from there it spread rapidly. Remember, coronavirus or SARS-CoV-2 is very close relative to what happened in China with some other respiratory infections, and we know that China, people walk around with masks and it's normal. So for us, when that happened to us, it was a great shocker, but for them it wasn't. So we have some of these respiratory infections that are there that are very, very close to the SARS-CoV-2,
like the swine flu,
yes, and the MERS and the
MERS and others.
Yeah.
Okay, so really we should ignore the conspiracy theorists who say it was just man-made and just a bunch of rich guys. Some of them called what do you call them? Even Luciferians. You read all kinds of things.
Some trying to control the population, or the guys in big pharma trying to cash in. And I mean, there's always different kinds of stories, but like I said, as a scientist, we just try to contain the thing so that life can go on as normal as possible, and fortunately we're back there.
I want to talk a little bit about challenges. Is this a highly competitive environment, the medical laboratory space?
It is. And remember, there's only 2.3 million people in Botswana.
Some say 2.5.
Yes,
we don't know
give
for
or
sure.
take about. We don't know specifically, but around about there. And in those 2.3 million, not everyone uses medical aid. A lot of people, some of them go to government facilities for medical health services. So we are competing for a portion of the market, right? And already there's a lot of private medical laboratories in the country, about 33, 36 or so.
That many?
Yes, including the major hospitals. So the reason why I chose Joining specifically was there's no private medical laboratory there that is physically based there. There are some collection points with other medical laboratory, and a collection point is where you go to the doctor and then bloods would be taken and then they're shipped to GABs or they're shipped to wherever private medical lab is. The only other private medical lab is the Joining Hospital mine, but it services the mine workers. So I saw that opportunity and I went for it, because I was like, if samples are shipped elsewhere, if I could bridge that gap, and not just in Joining but the catchment areas and down south as well, I would be able to cash in on those.
Do you therefore do the entire value chain, so to speak, from start to finish, and give results there and there, or how does it work?
Yes, so how it works is that some of the doctors that are in Joining that we work with would see their patients and they'd send them to us. So we would then do the phlebotomy or the blood collection or whatever type of specimen that we need for our investigations, and then we would analyze that sample. We would run our investigations, and then we'd release the results. So this is it's the pre-analytical phase. That's when you see the patients and you log them into the system, take the bloods. The analytical phase would be when you're doing the actual running of the samples, and then the post-analytical phase is when you release the results to the requesting doctor, physician. So we do all of that, and
within Joining.
Yes.
Okay.
Within Joining. Of course, for specialized tests, we then, refer them, but for the...
To Gaborone or to Joburg?
To GABs.
Okay.
To Gaborone, yes. Because, like I said, we are 6 months old, so we are just a baby in this business, but I believe that we are able to provide the baseline services or the basic services, and a patient coming from Sekoma or Kakia doesn't have to come back 2 days later to come back for their results. We can just service them, and then they see the doctor and go back.
What did you say are the other challenges?
So supply chain. supply chain. Because I've been on one end of the spectrum, now I'm the end user. It can be entirely frustrating when you are not getting what you need for you to be able to service your clients. So like I said, we use these sophisticated equipment, right? So you have your machine there that costs, say, 200,000 or whatever, and you need consumables to run that instrument. You need what we call reagents, and we usually source them from suppliers. So I remember in Maranyane's inception, there was this one supplier who I'd, given my money to, and I was not getting any service. So it put a dent on the business, and it frustrated.
What do you mean given your monetary? You mean your financial position?
Yes, to source a certain instrument from me that I use in the lab. And 3 months down the line, I hadn't received anything. So I had to, seek help from the authorities. That's only how I got my finances back. And then only then, that's when I started looking for an alternative.
You had to sue?
No, I had to at least go to the police so that he can be, roughed up a bit legally to give me my money back so that I can reinvest it.
Okay.
So a lot of, if you're a new entrant in the market and you maybe don't have the numbers and you can't prove to a supplier perhaps that you can pay them back, usually they say, here's the equipment, cash, or maybe we source from other countries. But the problem with sourcing from other countries is you don't have after-sales support, technical or otherwise, and it becomes a problem. So it put a dent in the business, in that then I had to go back to the drawing board and have to redo everything. So, but I also learned a lot from that, and I this one time I was just like, stop focusing on the problem and look for solutions. That's when my mind started, going, and that's when I started.
Say that again. Stop focusing on
the problem and find solutions.
Yeah, people need to hear that a lot more.
Yeah.
And is this a male-dominated industry?
Certainly it is. There's only a few women in the industry, and I am the youngest. Most of them are male, my male counterparts, and much older, because some of them have served in the public service and then after that went and...
And how do you navigate that situation? Is it a problem or is it an advantage?
It's not a problem, because so the medical laboratory space, or we're a very small community. Some of them studied in IHS, and then now we're having a new breed coming out of University of Botswana. I studied in Namibia's University of Science and Tech. But when we come in, we all work together. So you find that when I was at Scottish Livingston Hospital, I knew someone in Gumare or in Maung or wherever. So we know each other, so we can navigate each other in that. However, we navigate now as business people, right? But there's a lot of help that comes from other people, and it's not entirely frustrating. But then now you're a business person, you need to look after your interests.
I want to touch a bit on your personal development side. I met you in a situation where you're attending a seminar, a conference. What is your attitude about those things, and why are you attending conferences? Is there a particular mindset behind it?
Yes, definitely. I look at myself as a sponge. I need to absorb as much as I can from people who are wiser than me, people who have more to say about the business space. I've only been there 6 months, and I've made mistakes, and I can learn from them. They can help me navigate better in the space of entrepreneurship. And that is why I find myself not only going to these seminars, but reading a lot as well, because I'm like, if I can avoid a mistake that someone else did and learn that through reading, that would certainly be helpful. Yeah, so I'm always like, okay, what's the worst that can happen in this situation? It's death. But I'm not dead, so it means that I can always get up and do what I need to do. Even when things look bleak, all I have to do is be consistent, get up, show up every day, and make sure that I do what I need to do. And I know that something will come out of that persistence.
Okay. Any takeaways from the last one that you and I attended?
Yes, I was pleasantly surprised. Well, I knew what to expect, but not entirely. But when we spoke about building and sustaining generational wealth, it's a huge topic. Some of us are first generation entrepreneurs in our family, and it's quite challenging to navigate that space. So when you want to be able to leave something, a legacy for your children or the people who are going to come after you, it's important to learn how to do that. It's important to know why to do that. And it's important because you don't want the second generation to suffer as much as you did, right? So you are creating a path for them in order for things to be a bit easier for them. So understanding that I'm the first one in my family, but with all the support that I have, it is very important to learn from people such as yourself and other people that have something to say about that, to say, okay, you're still young, right? So if you can do this and that, which I learned from my younger days, then you can be able to succeed. And obviously we don't want to walk right into a ditch if we can avoid it. Right?
Congratulations, you're very attentive. You picked up quite a few points. Let me talk about your wins and your triumphs. Perhaps 6 months is too short a period to assess a company or its results, but nevertheless, even listed companies give results every 6 months. What would you say are your triumphs and wins?
Yes, I just want to say that the community of Jone is very receptive to me. I was born in Jone actually 34 years ago. I just gave that up. So I feel like I've gone back home, right? So the community is very receptive of what I'm doing and what I'm trying to do. So there's not much pushback in terms of what I'm doing. When I got there, I went to the DHMT District Health Management Team. I went to Molaudi. I went to all the people that I thought, should know about my existence. And I was welcome. And now I'm able to just go in and do certain things. I'm very big on CSR. And when I go in and I introduce myself, I'm accepted. And that has helped a lot to just help navigate me in that space. And I work with other doctors who trust what I do, that, that rapport that we've built has also built confidence in me to say, okay, I can actually really do this. It's just been a couple of months, but, there's people who trust that I can render a service of a certain caliber, and I've done that. And obviously I do not want to slip up. Obviously I don't want to disappoint. So whenever something positive happens in the midst of challenges, I make sure that I celebrate it 110%, because they're more troughs than there are peaks. But when I'm up there, I make sure, I remember the first time I got my first payment from the medical aid, I called my mom. I think it was 200 Pula or something like that. I was like, Mom, it's actually happening. I actually got a payment. And she was like, that's my girl. So it can be things that people think are mundane and small, but for me, because I know where I've been, I know how extremely challenging and overwhelming it can get. When you get something like that, is definitely worth celebrating.
And it's interesting you should say that, because I've heard a lot of doctors complain about delays for getting payments from medical aid. How serious a problem is that?
It can be detrimental to the company, and because we rely on the reimbursements of the medical aid, that is our source of revenue. So if you get a private client who pays you on the spot, we rejoice because we know we got our ROI. But when you still have to then submit your claims to the funders, it becomes a process. Maybe after 2-3 weeks, they'll be able to give a payment back. However, say for instance, I've run a full LFT, liver function test. There are a couple of parameters that we check, right? And this is just an example, a very, very basic example. And then you get certain payments for something, and then other payments are denied. But you've already helped the client, or maybe the client hasn't told you that they've maxed out their medical aid, but you've already serviced the client. So we face those kind of challenges, and it can be really gruesome. That's why people who have got reserves are better off than me, because then they can be able to pay their rent, they can be able to pay their employees. Fortunately, I've got 3 employees, and 2 of them are on retainer, 1 is full-time. So if I've paid rent, if I've paid her and the retainer guys, I can sleep at night. But that doesn't mean that I don't have other bills that I have to pay. Yeah. So it can put a dent in the business. So
you're taking action to build up reserves in view of that obvious rainy day scenario that keeps popping up?
Yes, and maybe no. Yes, in the sense that, so it's been 6 months. Remember, the first month was, I wasn't really seeing patients, so I could really say 5 months of actual, business and revenue. And the first 2-3 months, I was a bit excited. I was like, okay, there's actually something going in. And then in the latter part of these 6 months, that's when the challenges started coming in, and that's when I'm like, I actually need to do something about this, otherwise I'm going to close shop before even the year comes through. So it's not
I
easy,
teach my mentees to apply what I call the 50-30-20 rule. 50% of whatever you make is for your bills and for necessities. 30% is for savings and investments, and only the 20% that remains would be for luxuries and entertainment. Do you think that's a good model, and are you not endeavoring to adopt it?
It's a good model, also that I've heard of or read about. In this particular moment, I that 20% for me doesn't exist, unfortunately.
You mean for luxuries?
For luxuries, yes, because I can't afford to spend on luxuries, right? So there's certain sacrifices that I make. I'm like, okay, if I've covered the 50%, which is the rent, which is the bills and everything, then I can sleep at night. And then the 30% still is a huge struggle, because I'm still trying to service the 50%. So I'm still at a point where I'm trying to...
If you're rigorous about it, it all works out in the end. If you are really disciplined about it and march through the difficulty, it works out.
Definitely. I don't know if you remember the question that I asked you in joining. I was like, for someone like me who has a vision of diversifying from just medical to other sectors of the economy, but you are faced with these kind of challenges, what words of advice do you have, right? And you responded and you said, we then need to sit and look at what you're doing right and what you're not doing right, and then take it from there. And I went and reflected on that, and I was like, okay, what am I doing right? What am I not doing right? Right? And then I came up with certain things that I need to maybe put on hold or pursue, or all of that. And I'm very positive that I will definitely get there. I will definitely get there.
So am I. Can feel it. And in terms of Zaka, I mean, I've always wanted to ask the Zaka question. is there really money in medical labs? Can somebody really become super rich or substantially wealthy from just running a lab, or maybe or even multiple labs? Where is the Zaga?
So if you do it theoretically, you're like, okay, for instance, if I see 10 patients a day and they're doing these kind of tests, and the medical aid is going to reimburse me, say, 1,000 pula for each, and then I see them for the whole month, maybe 10 patients a day, and you do the math, you're like, wow, I'm going to be rich. And then you go in and then you realize that there are other things that you need to pay for. You need to pay for your supplies. You need to do this and this. Of course, you would have factored in all of those prior, right? That's running costs and all of that. For established medical laboratories, I would say perhaps that could be the case, right? But for me right now, I know that I will get to a point where I'm like, yes, I'm breaking even and even beyond, and I need to push certain barriers. But I believe that diversifying is where I will be able to really get my breakthrough, because we've seen through COVID that if you just have your eggs in one basket, it doesn't really work out. So as a farmer, because I'm also a farmer, I want to tap into the farming space. I want to tap into the real estate space, and then divide my eggs in that way, so that I can be able to have multiple streams of income. Because what happens if perhaps people don't want to come to Maranyane for a certain reason, then that's it with me, right? So I believe that though money can be made, it's probably not, for me, the wisest approach.
Okay, so talk a little bit about your farming activities. What are you doing?
Yes, so prior to focusing fully on Maranyane Medical Lab, I was doing horticulture. So in 2001, I started with cabbages. So I plowed them at my mother's field here in Mokolodi village. So
it's very far from Johnny.
Yes, this is when I was still in Gabs. So I stayed in Mokolodi, so it was literally a walking distance. I could go and talk to the cabbages in the morning every day before I went to work, right? And then after the cabbages, I was like, it's a bit of a saturated market. I want something that is a bit more niche. And then I did my research, and then I was like, strawberries. And then that's when I went into strawberry farming. So I became a strawberry farmer. It's a small community of
Still
people.
in Mokolodi?
Yes, still in Mokolodi. It's a small community of people, but at some point last year, the borders were closed because our local suppliers were able to service the local industry. Yes. So unfortunately, because it is very time consuming, and I was doing this while I was fully employed. So because I was a farmer, and then I was starting up Maranyane, and I was fully employed in a very engaging job, I had to sort of focus and streamline my resources and my time. And I was like, okay, what should I choose? Strawberries, Maranyane. And the choice was obvious because we're sitting here now, right? And however, that is why I'm saying diversify. I'm definitely going to go back into strawberry farming because, yes, you can make moolah there.
What is the cycle with strawberries? How long does it take for them to mature, for them to come to market?
So I planted them in March. That's when I got my supply from a gentleman by Kolobeng. He's one of the biggest producers in Botswana. And so I got them in March, and then they started fruiting around June. So they're called June bearers. Yes, they're different varieties. I had the June bearers, and they will fruit for about 3 months. So you can supply a lot in those 3 months if you've done your job properly. I have with one of my mentors, actually, Meghorata Abutsing. Lekau, yes, she's a strawberry farmer and a mentor of mine. And then we once conducted the first ever strawberry workshop at her farm in Mamashia, and we invited the different organizations from the Ministry of Agriculture, your layers, and farmers came because people were like, oh, strawberries, and people want to go into it. It was quite a success. I was interviewed on radio for that because we were the ones who were organizing it, and it is a market that is upcoming in Botswana, and it has great potential. So that's why I'm like, okay, once Maranyane is settled, she will definitely finance some of these things, and then we were able to have that cash flow. Yeah.
So, you mentioned real estate. Anything firm there?
No, not yet. And hence me following you, on your social media platforms, coming to the actual, workshop we had in Joining, because I'm like, this is what I have in my long-term plan, because I have short-term, medium to long-term goals, and real estate is part of what I want to have as part of what Maranyane brings to service people. So I'm starting now to learn the tricks of trades, to know how to invest, what to do, what not to do, and all of that, so that once again, when Maranyane has a firm, solid neck, I'll be like, yes, you have to finance this and that and the other. So it's me preparing myself for that.
Okay. Now, I don't know whether we touched on this, but setbacks, any cataclysmic events or major setbacks you had to get out of, and how did you do that, and what advice can you share with my viewers on that?
I think we might have touched on this earlier. I think the major thing, and the way I dealt with it, I was like, I need to arrest this before it hemorrhages all over the place, right? Because when I went to Joining, I told the doctors I have all these kind of services, especially the baselines I have. So your patients don't have to come back 2 days later and all of that. And then when that supplier guy messed me up, I couldn't deliver. And I went back to...
How did the story happen?
So what happened was I'd given him a deposit for this instrument that he was sourcing from India. And the agreement was, I pay you a deposit, and then when the machine comes, I can always pay all of it.
The balance.
Yes. And then I realized...
And we're talking substantial amounts.
Yes. I realized that when I kept asking him, where's the instrument? I'm opening up the lab. This was a month before I resigned to go full force, and he was, playing delay tactics. And then I resigned. I was like, okay, it will come. And then I went to Joining. A month later, 2 months later, the guy is still telling me, no, the supply this, supply that, until I was like, this guy. I was on the other end of things. I can definitely call the supplier and say, hey, this is who I am. I'm having issues with your distributor. And that's exactly what I did. And the supplier was like, no, an order was placed, but the payment was never made. And when I confronted him, that's when he stopped taking my calls. That's when it became a problem. And then I was like, okay, I need to engage authorities, and that's how the whole thing unfolded. But it's a short story, though it happened over a period of 4 months. And then only after that, so it had the potential of disrupting everything, because here I am, I'm saying I can provide ABC, and I can't. So people look at you like, this little girl. But she's coming here, she's saying that she can do XYZ. She's incompetent. She's not delivering. So I was trying to protect the brand, right? So in that's why I quickly shifted my focus from the problem, and I tried finding ways of how to arrest this bleed. And I worked with the mine lab to help me with some of the tests, obviously at a fee, and other guys. So I went back to them, explained the situation, and apologized, of course, profusely. And then once that was settled with him, I started the whole process again. So yeah, I'm happy to say
you're very
we've
lucky
restored.
to get the police to intervene, because the police normally would say that's a civil matter.
Yes, and I think the way we did it, because we knew where he worked, we knew where the wife worked, and the wife had signed the contract as well. So they were like, okay, they are both in on it. So it was just them saying, this is a civil matter, but we'll just make a call, right? We'll just see how it goes. We'll just help you out. So they made the call, and they're like, we're coming, pick up. You don't want your wife to be embarrassed. And the guy started running helter-skelter. And fortunately, I got my money back. And it's not everyone who gets their money back, right?
Yeah,
so,
you're very fortunate.
Yes.
To use the police department as your debt collection agency.
Yeah, I was at my wit's end, but I'm very grateful. However, it would have simply gone to the courts, and it would still be a pending matter.
Yeah.
But they.
So you haven't had a situation that totally flattened you, not yet.
Not yet, and hopefully I won't.
Never.
I won't have any.
Yeah.
But very, very overwhelming. See, the first 4 months, I was running the whole lab alone. I was the receptionist, I was the cleaner, I was the driver, I was the technical, I was the manager. So it was extremely overwhelming. I'd leave the lab at like 10, but in the morning I have to be there. I have to, come do this and that. So I closed down the office. So those were some of the things until I got someone who is now there full time to assist, and that's how I'm here now. So it wasn't cataclysmic, right? But for me, in my mind, it was, because I was new in the space. I was trying to navigate everything, and I was just like every single time on my knees, like, God, you didn't bring me here to suffer.
Yeah.
So
this is not a trick question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Knowing what you know now, what would you advise your younger self, like in your teens? What sort of key advice would you give yourself, without necessarily dwelling on your regrets? But you know what I'm trying to say.
Yes, right. And that's something very close to my heart, because what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to not have the younger Katlegos or Loratos or whoever go through the same thing. So what I do every other Saturday, I go to the Joining Library and I just volunteer. I mentor the kids. I help them out with homework. I bought board games for them. So some of them were the first time they saw a Scrabble board. They were like, "What is this?" And we engage in that manner. And I'm also a huge advocate for public health education. So I teach them about NCDs, and we come up with board games and word puzzles and
NCDs stands
non-communicable diseases.
Yes.
I'm very, very passionate about that. So what I want to do is, because we know in Setswana loroloja lo salimetse, if I knew what I now, what they don't know, and at this point now, I want them to have that experience through me and help build or have a certain influence on them, so that when they grow up, they can, point to something to say, okay, there was this one Katlego who helped me, and
so
I'm
is it
here
a
now.
partnership with the library?
So I went there this one Saturday, and I was just like, hey, I'm here. I want to, help the kids. How can I do that? And the chief librarian was like, thank God, we always have kids coming in their numbers on Saturdays. So when you're free, come through. So when I knock off at 1 o'clock, I go straight to the library. I spend about 2 hours with them. Wow. We have fun. And sometimes you think that you're helping someone and they're helping you. So when I come back from the library, I'm so distressed because I've been laughing a lot, and they're funny, and it's very therapeutic for me, right? But I know that I'm also imparting on them, and yeah, it's very exciting, and there are projects that I'm working on that I want to see roll out first in Joining, and hopefully in the other.
So there's no
areas.
specific advice to give yourself apart from you're doing the right thing. You went the right way.
Yes, it would be learn as much as you can. You cannot box yourself. You cannot say, okay, I think I'm tapped out. Because we learn things theoretically, and when it comes to the practical side of things, it becomes, entirely different. So for me, it would be have a mentor, like not Napoleon Hill from Think and Grow Rich only, right?
Yeah.
But have someone physically here who speaks the language, who can be able to help you navigate the space, who's been there, who can help carry you as you go. Because I didn't have that, and in hindsight, I'm like, perhaps I should have.
Yeah. No, that's a very good answer.
Yeah.
Now, when you grab that crystal ball and we look forward, even a couple of decades ahead, what do you see? What can you tell us in terms of Maranyane Medical Lab and for yourself as Katlego?
Yes, so Maranyane Medical Lab will certainly go regional, right? It's not just going to be a medical lab that is based in Joining. I foresee it in places in the region, right? Could be Angola, it could be wherever, but I want to break into other markets. So that's why I told you I have short, medium to long-term plan goals in the foreseeable 10 or so years or less. So that is where I want to see it. And then we spoke about this as well. I want to see Maranyane being diversified into different sectors of the economy, tapping into farming, hiring people who will be doing all of that in different sectors of the market. But one thing that's very close to my heart, and I think I've mentioned it, is CSR, is seeing other corporate social responsibility, or initiative as other people call it. I want to be of influence to the younger generation. I think that is my purpose in life. That is what I'm here for. Maranyane, I think, will springboard me to be able to do that in a greater platform. And just to touch on one thing, Maranyane has brought a couple of opportunities for me. I do this thing called Wise Up Wednesdays every Wednesday, where I share information.
Where?
On my social media platforms, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Facebook.
In the form of what? A blog or?
Yes, a short clip, right? So I'll talk about diabetes, what it is. The one from yesterday was actually talking about non-communicable diseases. I was giving the statistics. I was then I always try to rope in the lab. So if it's diabetes or if it's any kind of disease, how does the lab play a role in diagnosis and or treatment, so that the people are also informed about what does this lab thing do, right?
Well, you mentioned this non-communicable disease problem a couple of times. I think maybe we should explore it a little bit. And where are we getting it wrong as Botswana, and what are the diseases that are bedeviling us the most?
So globally, around 41 million people die annually from non-communicable diseases. This is 41 million globally.
Being what? What diseases are those?
Yes, I'll come to that. I just want to give you a bit of statistics because, like I said, as an epidemiologist, these are the things that I look at first. And then you have heart diseases or cardiovascular diseases taking the huger chunk of this 41 million. It's actually almost 18 million people dying globally annually from heart diseases, and then it's cancers at 9.6 million if my mind serves me well. Chronic respiratory diseases like your asthmas and other chronic respiratory infections taking about 3 million, and then diabetes taking 1.6 million. So this is globally. When we bring it to the region, every year. So when we bring it to the region, in sub-Saharan Africa, we have about 41% of the whole population living with hypertension. 20% is estimated.
How much?
41%.
That's ridiculously high.
That's almost every in 3 people, 2 people can be sure from a statistical standpoint.
Well, 4 out of 10.
Yes, 4 out of 10. And then when we bring it closer to home, recent studies show that about 46% of mortalities or deaths are caused by non-communicable diseases. I'm not talking about someone in the tropical
When you say a
island.
disease cannot be communicated, you mean what?
So non-communicable diseases basically means these are chronic diseases that cannot be passed from one person to another.
Are they necessarily lifestyle diseases?
Yes, that's the very, very basic way of calling it, right? These are lifestyle diseases because one, they're characterized by being long-lasting and very slowly progressing. Your cancers, your diabetes, these chronic cardiovascular diseases and respiratory diseases, you don't wake up, for instance, and have it tomorrow. But it takes years for cancer to build up. It takes years for you to have diabetes. Unfortunately, now data is showing that more and more younger people are being diagnosed with diabetes. And it's quite evident because we have children now from a young age, indulging in fast foods and your pizzas.
So it's
your
really
this
a
and
diet
that.
issue.
It's a diet issue. It's a lack of exercise issue for maybe the older generation. It's also just pretty much a lifestyle disease, smoking, overindulging of alcohol. The body will then tell you that because you've been doing XYZ for so many years, these are the results. Unfortunately, yes, some of them you can be predisposed because, genetically, but the bulk of them are because of what we eat. So you are basically what you eat.
And you are at the tail end, at the lab. Is there something you can do to reverse this or to help people, educate them in terms of diet, in terms of the dangers they're exposing to?
Yes, that is what I'm doing actually. Like I said, on Wise Up Wednesdays, every single Wednesday we talk about a disease and what it is. And I always, at the end of the video, advise, please go to the doctor. You don't have to be sick for you to run your annual test or your biannual test so that we can just see what's going on. And then you're like, okay, I'm good. You don't have to go in saying, I had, a pain in my chest or something like that. So it has to be something that we do on a regular basis. Someone said the other day, as babies, when babies are born, they go for their, routine, checkups at the doctor.
Yeah, they actually have a card. Things are marked.
Yes, if we had that until you are an adult, we could be able to, see whether there are any diseases that progress from when you're youth to middle age to when you're older, but then it stops when you're a certain age. So I would say that
it should be revived for adults.
It should never stop, right? But one thing that I'm trying to do is public health education, and the Wise Up Wednesday platform lended me an online radio show on a radio station called So Online by some of our Zambian brothers. So they saw me.
Distributed from Zambia.
Yes, they're based in the UK and Zambia, so it's distributed from Zambia, but it's online, so you can tune in anywhere from the world. So for an hour, I speak to different health professionals about health issues because they didn't have that kind of show on their radio show, and they saw the value that I brought. So we take things and we dissect them from a medical point of view or from a health point of view, and we also give advice. We also have fitness challenges where we want the audience to actually engage, and then we share videos online and we want them to engage. So for me, the biggest thing is health education. And I'm also working on a project. That's why I was saying Maranyane has brought out these other ventures.
Benefits.
Yeah.
So if you could just talk to that viewer and advise them. I know you can't keep advice like that, but nevertheless, in terms of what food, because if we're saying 4 in 10, it's a very, very serious number. And if it's diet related, as you said, and exercise related, what food do you think an average person should immediately avoid, and what protocols in terms of fitness or activity should one immediately adopt?
Okay, so we need to avoid refined foods. And what do we mean by refined foods? If something grows from the ground as maize, for instance, it's very advisable that you take it as it has grown from the ground. But if you start processing
it's genetically modified already.
But then if you start processing it and, making other things that doesn't even look like the original thing, you put chemicals in it so that it can stay longer on the shelf, and then it has preservatives and all these things, right? So my advice would be reduce the intake of processed foods and sugars as well, right? As well as saturated fats. I was vegan for a year and a half. I didn't take meat at all for a year and a half.
Why did you quit?
It was for, I wasn't sick or anything, but I'd read a few studies and I was just like, okay, I just want to see how, this. And I'm a very active person. I go to the gym every single day. I eat healthy. But for me, I was just an experiment until I got to joining, and the stress of the business was hitting me left, right, and center, and I was getting skinnier, and I was like, maybe I need to recall the meat. But also looking at your meat consumption, because the saturated fats coming from the meat, whether it's red meat or white meat, chicken, we need to be very cognizant of what we put in our bodies. If, for instance, every single morning you eat liguinya and mukwejepe or muhodu or serobe every single day for 5 days, unfortunately that's going to work against you, in the long term. And I always say to people, okay, you don't be like Kat, who's very particular, but you can have your junk food once in a while. But
why? You can't celebrate using junk food. What's the point of having it once in a while? Can you have a little poison once in a while? No.
Yeah,
you can't have a little cyanide every now and then.
Yeah, but because of the lifestyles that we live, you just go through a drive-through. You don't have to cook. You can order your food on the go. It's convenience for a lot of people. But sometimes it's that convenience that in the long run bites us back. And so I would just say, try to not eat as much refined foods, cut on the sugar, don't have a lot of saturated foods, and then keep active, exercise, right? As much as you possibly can. And yeah, those things, when you do them, the body starts thinking, she's doing something, and the body starts to appreciate, right? Unfortunately, we're getting more in younger people, like I said, being diabetic, some in their 30s.
Unbelievable.
I mean, we know that diabetes is for 60 plus. That's how it's been, right? But now we're seeing studies are actually showing that,
because people start eating junk earlier,
as babies, really, right? So because things have changed. My grandmother was from My maternal grandmother was from Mangkhodi, and they used to walk from Mangkhodi to Bontleng. You know, every other time they had to come here.
Yeah.
We
Then
don't
they
do
enjoyed
that.
it, yeah.
We don't do that anymore. They grew their food from the fields. We, you know, take fast foods.
Yeah.
So the dynamics have changed drastically. That's why we've seen a peak. Actually, this one study suggests that in 2030, we're going to see, in sub-Saharan Africa, we're going to see non-communicable diseases taking over the infectious diseases. Because in Africa, most of the mortalities are caused by infectious diseases, TB, HIV, malaria,
That is so
and such.
horrible. Yeah.
So it's a shift, and we can do something about it. And that's why, you know, the Minister of Health is trying to push communication and public education, and, you know, this mind shift change by HE. We really need to change our minds. Other than that, we're going to see from 46%, 50%, 51%, and we don't want to see that.
Yeah. I think the only way to educate the public is to make them understand that this means you're going to die young.
Certainly.
This means you're going to die early.
Certainly. Whenever
and people should value their lives.
Whenever I have clients coming in to Maranyane, I sit them down. I just don't draw bloods and then call it a day. I sit them down. I'm like, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and this is why I'm going to do it. And then when the results come back, we sit down and we talk about it. We're like, okay, so this is your cholesterol. This is your HbA1c, one of the metabolic markers. We go into it, and I'm like, okay, if you could perhaps do 1, 2, 3, and then you come back in 6 months and we see the picture. So we engage in that. So I try to sensitize, I try to show them why it's important for them to have a bit of a lifestyle change, to be cognizant of what they put in their bodies. So it helps, and I think with platforms such as the my social media platforms, the online radio, and even here, you know, we can
We're
be
slowly
able,
getting through to people.
to spread the message.
But before I leave the subject, I came across a newspaper article suggesting that HIV is rearing its ugly head back. As an epidemiologist and from your experience at Maranyane, is that true? Are we having an AIDS problem again?
The numbers are showing that we are having a resurgence of new infections. Unfortunately, I haven't really spoke to the literature as to why that could be, you know, the issue. But we are seeing a lot of newly diagnosed HIV infections. And
where is that coming from all of a sudden? I thought we were done with that.
No, unfortunately, it's all about behavior at the end of the day. When we're discussing with my peers, we always say that we grew up in a phase where it was pamukate. It was so in your face that, you know, HIV would kill you. You know, if you don't take good care of yourself, if you don't. There was that one gentleman on BTV, Rasta. I don't know if they need to bring that guy back, because we had that information direct in our faces, and we became a bit, you know, conservative in terms of our reckless behavior. But this is just my opinion, of course. So perhaps it could be that things have changed, and behaviorally.
Or we've stopped talking about it as an emergency. We've pushed it to the back burner.
Yeah, because, you know, we had made huge strides with
especially
HIV.
under Lerumo.
Yes, we had made huge strides. That's why he got an award just recently with the 73rd regional WHO summit that was held here in Gaborone.
Yes.
He and his government of the day had made strides, you know, with your PMTCT, or transmission from mother to child infections, going very, very low to none, with people who were diagnosed with HIV knowing their HIV status, as well as adhering to treatment, and that caused a viral suppression. So in terms of those 1990 you know, guidelines, we were there, and we surpassed that, right? So now it's very, very sad to see us then, you know, going back. But there are efforts being made.
Should they bring the condoms campaign back?
Certainly, in other areas, I see that happening a lot. In my CSR activities, where we partner with some of these other NGOs, we see a lot of condoms being handed out and all of that. There was one major event in Joining just recently. They were going to the camps, to the to where the people were staying, and they were just handing out condoms, so those things still happen.
By the education, with the education.
Certainly.
All right. Are you ready to hit me with a question as we wrap up?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Well, I've heard a bit of your story from, Joining, but I want to know how I can get to, where you are in terms of building a solid company and having that company, other companies, emanate from that and build something that's quite sustainable. You mentioned The Richest Man in Babylon. I love that book to bits as well as Think and Grow Rich. And Arcad, one of the richest man in Babylon, when he was with the group of men that were called by the king for him to come and educate them, he one of the rules to a lean purse was that your children have to make other children, right? So your money has to work for you.
The rules against the lean purse.
But like I said, maybe beginning of the conversation, I'm at a place where I'm like, I'm still trying to get that 50%. So it becomes, a bit of a tricky one to try to navigate and even foresee in the future, right? So,
well, the best way I can answer that question is that you've convinced me that I have a market for my book, which is coming out this very month. So perhaps you need to wait a little bit, because there I share my story, and I share the pivotal moments when there was a light bulb moments. I share couple of cataclysmic events. I share a couple of huge setbacks in courts and elsewhere that really made a difference. I share both the good, the bad, and the ugly. Not both, all the good, the bad, and the ugly. So let me not spoil it for you by sharing that, so that you can
I
look
have to
forward
get
to
a
the
copy.
book. I'm going to announce it in my socials. Once it's out, you'll be able to grab a copy.
Yeah, definitely. Like before coming here, I went to Exclusive Books and I got me a copy of one book. The title is very but it talks about finances, right? And I was just like,
what's the title?
Can I just say the name?
Yeah.
Unfuck your finances.
Yeah. Unf them.
Unf them. So I was like, I really need to unf my finances. Let me see what this book is all about. I'm very, very, excited about reading that copy. Yeah. Hopefully by the end of next week, I would have gone through it.
You'd have unf'd them. Okay.
Hopefully.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, this is the time of the show where you look a little bit at the camera and share your, inspirational sum up of what we discussed. Leave the viewer with something uplifting.
Okay. Hello, viewers. What I would just say to you is that, first of all, if you have something that you are really passionate about and want to pursue, first of all, read. We spoke about a few books. Think and Grow Rich was one of the books that I read for 2 years that really helped me take that leap. But other than that, you need to prepare thoroughly. You have to make sure that you take calculated risks. When you take that leap and plunge in, you are going to be met with so many challenges. But you need to fortify your mind. You need to know that even in the midst of challenges, I need to show up. I need to certainly wake up each and every single morning and face my challenges and have a problem solving mindset. Know that even if I have these challenges, I need to find a solution. And that's what helped me and what is helping me now. So get up, go for what you want, and it's certainly worth it. It certainly is worth it. So yes, get up and get what you want to get.
Okay. Wonderful conversation. Share with them all your socials, all your contacts, even physical addresses, your WhatsApps, everything.
Yes. So on our social media platforms, we are on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn, Facebook, TikTok, as well as Twitter, which is now called X, as Maranyane Medical Lab. That's our handle, Maranyane Medical Lab. We are physically based in Jwaneng, but like I said, we service...
Where in Jwaneng?
We are based plot 858 Deemani Street, just close to police. It's by the old Pep Mall. That's where we are. And we also service not only private patients, but corporates as well, with their wellness corporate wellness activities that they do have once in a while. So yes, please be sure to contact us there. Our office line, or one of our lines, is 73648074. I'll say that again, 73648074. Thank you.
All right. That was your WhatsApp, eh?
Yes.
Okay. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
very
you. Well.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
I drove all the way from here. I would have flown if I was in Maum.
Yeah.
Yes,
no,
it was a great opportunity, and I really, really thank you for
You're
that.
most welcome.
Thank you.
It was nice. It was a great conversation.
Thank you. It was.